Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic, Naruto and Hinata rewrite the timeline. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Where are we going, Sora Neeson? Well, you did say you were going on your first C rank tomorrow, right? I thought we should get you some supplies, he answered. But, I've already got food and some weapons, Naruto protested, what else could I need? When's the last time you replaced your kunai or shuriken? Sora asked, raising an eyebrow at the boy. Maybe a year or two ago. I can't really remember. Also, the Land of Waves is pretty far, especially when you're only walking. Do you have a sleeping bag for the trip? The boy's cheeks flushed slightly, maybe. Sora chuckled, come on, I think the shop is over this way. I'll even buy you some new toys. He rubbed his hands together in anticipation. And since Naomi's off training with Kurenai-san's team, she can't stop us from getting any fun stuff. I've already got a couple of ideas on what to get. A sly grin forming on Naruto's face, I like the sound of that. After another minute of walking, Sora spotted their destination. Intricately carved above the wooden door was the image of a dragon moving towards the sun. A bell rang as the two stepped inside. They had come during off hours, so he wasn't surprised to see that there weren't any other customers around. Welcome to the Rising Dragon. A voice chirped cheerfully, can I help you? Sora turned and smiled warmly at the girl. He walked up to the counter, Naruto following behind him. Even though he hadn't been to this shop in years, he still remembered that this shop had the best quality and selection of ninja supplies in the entire village. It was a little more on the expensive side, but Sora believed it was better to spend more money and not need something than to spend less and wind up dead. Yes, I'm looking for a few general supplies for this boy here, he answered, putting a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Replacement shuriken, kunai, a sleeping bag, those sorts of things. Of course. She turned her head behind her and raised her voice towards the door behind the counter, Neji. Lee, can one of you grab me a starter kit from back there? Yosh. Of course, Tenten. An exuberant voice replied from behind a door. Is there anything else you require? Don't encourage her, Lee, another voice chided, we're not her servants. I heard that Neji. You two agreed to help me while my dad was out of town, remember? We would never forget the oath we made to you. Lee proclaimed. Neji sighed, just give me a second to find it, I don't want Lee to tear down the store. I challenge you, Neji. The first one to find the supplies is the victor. And the loser must do 501 fingered push-ups. No, Neji replied flatly. All three of them. Sora thought, I didn't expect the entire team to be here. Sorry about that, Tenten said, rolling her eyes as she turned back to him. Was there anything else? She paused, seeming to focus on Naruto for the first time. Then she pointed at him, starting to look worried. Wait a second, I know who you are now. You do. Naruto said, beginning to look away, sorry, You're that kid who's always vandalizing everything. She said, her expression turning into a smile, I remember seeing you run away from the guards a few weeks ago. Not a bad job with that redecoration of the monument, but if you even think of doing anything like that to my family's shop, I'll kill you, she warned, her smile turning deadly. It's okay, I don't do that anymore, the boy said, breaking out in a grin. But if you liked what I did last time, I've been thinking about. Sora cuffed him lightly on the head. No more pranks on the monument. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything to the mountain again, I was only gonna. Or the Hokage's tower. Never mind. At that moment Neji opened the door behind Tenten and walked into the room. Here you go, he said, dropping the box onto the counter. Again, you have bested me, Neji. However, I will surpass you one day, my rival. Lee announced, striding into the room behind his teammate. As soon as we have finished aiding Tenten, I will train to make up for my defeat. Out of the corner of his eye, Sora noticed Naruto scrunch his eyebrows in confusion. Neji scoffed. I wasn't competing with you and we aren't rivals. Someone who fate has determined will never be my equal, can never be called my rival. Sora sighed inwardly, I can't wait until the Chunin exams, I couldn't stand Neji when he was like this. Neji. Tenten scolded, don't talk like that. Lee is our equal and more importantly our teammate. I do not insult his skill, Tenten, nor do I take pleasure in the situation. It is simply the will of fate. Tenten waved a hand up in frustration at the reply. Whatever you say, Neji. Neji-kun, was it? You should be careful about surrendering yourself to fate, Sora whispered, causing the boy to look at him. If one blames all of the misfortune in their life on destiny, there will come a point where they will no longer be able to move forward. He closed his eyes, letting out a deep breath, and if I had left everything to fate, we would all be dead 14 years from now, he added to himself, though he couldn't say it out loud. Neji glared at him with narrowed eyes. And what would you know of misfortune? Sora gave him a sad smile, more than I would hope for any of you children to know. The boy continued to eye him and was about to open his mouth again when Tenten interrupted him. Don't mind him, she said, shoving Neji out of the way. He doesn't have any manners. Sora shook his head. It's fine. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have intruded in the first place. No need to apologize, she assured him. Either of these idiots could use a lecture from time to time. Anyway, she began, clapping her hands together, is there anything else I can help you with? Actually, I was looking for. Now I remember you. Naruto suddenly said triumphantly, snapping his fingers and causing the two to face him. Huh, said Tenten. Naruto pointed towards Lee, you're the guy who fought Sora Nissen a few weeks ago. I wasn't sure because you got so much smaller, but it was definitely you. He nodded confidently. Sora, who's that? Lee asked, puzzled. Sora raised his hand with a smirk. That would be me. I assure you I have never met, nor fought with this man in my life, Lee told Naruto. But it had to be you. Who else has eyebrows that big or clothes that weird? I believe his name was Guy, Naruto-kun, not Lee, Sora informed the boy. Ah, crap, Tenten moaned, dropping her face into her hand. You must be the one Sensei mentioned the other day. I am so sorry about him. Oh, Lee exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. Yes, Sensei described your battle to us. He said it was a true display of the power of youth. Yeah. Sora managed to say, the spar was very, youthful. It was so youthful, that, I could hardly believe it. Yeah, that's it. He finished with a weak laugh. Truly, I wish I had been able to see it with my own eyes. I'm still confused, Naruto said, squinting at Lee, why do you look like a smaller version of that bushy-brows guy? I don't know what you mean, I don't look much like Guy-sensei, though I appreciate the compliment. Naruto frowned at him. Are you joking? He asked. Of course I'm not, Lee paused. Oh, I see, you meant my clothes, right. This uniform was specially tailored to allow for free movement and protect from wind resistance during a fight. Guy-sensei gave me one as a reward for all my hard work. But your hair. Naruto insisted, pointing at Lee. He flashed a thumbs up and beamed her. Naruto, it's cool isn't it? I'm not surprised you like it. If you'd like I can show you how to do yours this way too. Naruto's eyes opened wide, I think I'm fine right now. Let me know if you ever change your mind. Right, Naruto answered half-heartedly. Tenten, I will go sort the entire storage room now. Lee shouted. Then he ran back through the door he'd come through before. Naruto looked like he was at a loss for words, and Sora laughed. Tenten giggled, evidently as amused by the exchange as he was. Don't mind Lee, he's always like that. But I'm surprised, she added, looking at Sora, not many people can hold their own against Guy-sensei. Neji shook his head. While he appeared stoic, there was still a slight pull on the edge of his lips that betrayed the fact that he was amused by the situation as well. True, even if he is eccentric, Guy-sensei is incredibly skilled. I'm impressed by your abilities, though I still think you are foolish for not understanding the power of fate. Your beliefs will be your undoing if you meet with someone blessed with skills beyond your own. Neji, Tenten warned. Neji looked away. I apologize for my impertinence. I simply do not want anyone to struggle needlessly when it is avoidable. Especially not someone with the ability to match Guy-sensei. He turned around and headed towards the door to the back of the shop as well. I'm going to go make sure that Lee doesn't destroy anything, he announced, waving his hand in farewell. Tenten fumed as the door closed behind him. That boy is so, arg. She looked at Sora and bowed her head. Sorry. I do my best to keep him and Lee in line, but it can be hard sometimes. What was that guy's problem anyway? Naruto grumbled. She sighed. Neji isn't a bad guy, he's just had too many things go wrong for him in his life. But I understand if this has given you a bad impression of this shop, Tenten apologized with a bow. I shouldn't let them talk to customers, she muttered. It's really all right, Sora reassured her. To be honest, I'm grateful for the conversation. Usually I can't stand shopping. He paused. And I wasn't offended by Neji-san. I know what it's like to have a hard life and I don't resent him for being bitter. I appreciate your kindness, she thanked him, inclining her head. Still, I hope he gets better someday. Oh, don't worry, he will. I'm sure of it. Tenten smiled at him. Well, if we haven't run you out yet, I'm happy to help you. You said there was something else you needed, right? Oh yeah, I'd almost forgotten about that, Sora replied as he unlatched his 2 knives sheaths from his belt and laid them on the counter. I need a whetstone to sharpen these, but the metal is specially treated so I need something superior to the normal ones. I see, Tenten said. She reached out to one of the knives, but paused. Do you mind? When Sora gestured his approval, she picked the knife up and studied it. She traced the images carved into the blade's scabbard with her finger for a moment. This piece is beautiful. The fox design especially, she complimented before pulling the blade free. Whoa, said Naruto in awe. When I saw you use those against Bushy-Brow Sensei, I thought they were just regular knives or kunai, but those are way better. After a moment of inspecting the knife, Tenten's eyes widened in astonishment. Wow. This isn't just better than a regular knife, I'm not sure if I've ever seen craftsmanship of this quality. She experimentally slashed the blade through the air a few times before sheathing it. I'm jealous. If you don't mind me asking, where did you get these? The question brought forth old unbidden memories. A woman sparring with him, teaching him the basics of the weapon he'd resolved to master. The same woman's smiling face as she hugged him and congratulated him on his marriage, giving him a box with 2 flawless daggers inside. Running towards her, trying to stop the attack he knew she couldn't avoid. Being too slow to stop it from killing her. He was always too slow. He looked away, it was a gift. From a good friend of mine, he said after a moment. Must have been one talented friend, Tenten said, turning the sheath around in her hands as she continued to admire its decorations. I've learned some basic smithing and would love to craft weapons someday, but I'm not sure I'll ever be talented enough to create something quite like this. Even my father couldn't make something this fine, and he's been making weapons all his life. Maybe, but then again, maybe not. You may surprise yourself, Sora told her. Especially since you were the one that made these in the first place, he thought wistfully. Oh, I never said I'd give up, she replied with a smirk. Anyway, it's about time I actually did my job instead of admiring your weapons. We keep the really valuable stuff in the back, she explained, just give me a sec. Tenten disappeared into the back room that Neji and Lee had gone into earlier. A few moments later, she emerged with a medium-sized rectangular bar wrapped in cloth. This is the best grade of sharpening stone you'll find in the entire village, she promised, handing him the bar. Sora accepted the bar, unwrapping the cloth from the stone. After a few moments of inspecting it, he nodded. This looks perfect, he said with a smile. Thanks, I've been meaning to get one of these since I got here, but I could never find the time. Of course, you won't find a better ninja shop in Konoha than the Rising Dragon. She said proudly, now is that the last of what you needed? Actually, Sora answered, putting a hand on Naruto's shoulder, I promised to get Naruto some equipment besides the basics. Oh, that's right, Naruto said excitedly, but I don't have any idea what I should get. Sora ruffled his hair affectionately, and began to grin mischievously. Don't worry, he assured Naruto, like I said earlier, I've already got a couple of ideas. I can't believe I let you two go to a shop without me, Naomi said, rubbing her eyes tiredly as she sat across the table from her husband at the Yakiniku Q barbecue restaurant. Okay, very slowly, tell me what you bought for him. Well, after he got all of his basics, I didn't want to get anything too flashy, Sora insisted. First off, I got him some smoke bombs. Smoke bombs, she said flatly. Well, at least they're not dangerous, but what could possibly be the point in buying smoke bombs? I don't think those would be very useful for this mission. Smoke bombs make for great entrances. You just burst through the smoke and bam. Instant recognition. Naomi rolled her eyes. I can't even believe I have to ask this, but you realize that's not what smoke bombs are for, right? You use them to escape enemies, not announce yourself to people. Well, yeah, of course I do. But that's why no one expects you to use a smoke bomb for an entrance. It's brilliant. Well, you're right that most people wouldn't expect it, so I guess I have to give you that. Did you get him anything else? Well, there was one other thing. I might have gotten him some explosive tags, Sora said sheepishly, avoiding Naomi's eyes. Naomi dropped her face into her palm and sighed. Yes, I definitely regret letting you two go anywhere without me now. I hope he doesn't get himself killed using those things. Maybe I should just steal all of them until someone has actually taught him how to use those things without blowing himself up. Hey, don't do that, Sora pleaded. He was so happy to get them. Don't worry, he's responsible. Naomi raised an eyebrow. When it counts, he added hesitantly. Naomi blew a loose strand of hair out of her face. Fine, she relented. I guess I shouldn't worry so much. And I do trust you both. She paused. When you don't go shopping together at least. She looked him straight in the eye. Still, should he really bring those things with him? Or in other words, is it worth risking a change in what Naruto does during this mission by giving him more equipment? Sora nodded, understanding her underlying meaning. I gave him some basic instruction, but I made him promise not to use either the smoke bombs or explosive tags unless he absolutely needed to. He probably won't have to use them, but there's no harm in giving him the option if he needs it. I see. He gave those tools to him in case our own presence in this timeline has an effect on the mission. It looks like I have to give him credit for preparing for any possibility. Naomi smiled. I suppose that's fair. Like I said, I trust you, so I'll respect this. Just, please try not to give him explosives next time, okay? Sora rubbed the back of his head, embarrassed. Sorry, I guess maybe I did go a little overboard. I'll make sure to be better about it next time. I already said it was okay. Besides, I can't say I'm that surprised. You've always been impulsive like this after all, so I'm used to this sort of thing by now, she said with a laugh. So how was the rest of your day? I miss anything good? Sora shrugged. Not much. I met Gai-san's students while I was at the tool shop. They seemed like an interesting bunch. Is that so? She said quietly. Neji-Nisan. How about you? He asked, moving the conversation away from her cousin. Nothing too exciting. I met Kurenai-san's other two students, Kiba-kun and Shino-kun, though I'm sure you could have guessed that. It's an odd experience, helping to teach that team. Sora nodded. I know what you mean. At that moment, a waitress came and set down their orders at their table. They thanked her and she retreated. You know, Sora said as she began to cut her meal into smaller pieces, if you wanted barbecue, you only had to ask. I could have made this at home. She paused, taking her eyes from her plate to look at him. I feel bad making you cook all of the time, she replied simply. You cook a lot, he insisted. That's just because ramen is the only thing you ever want to eat, she countered, shaking her head. Face it, Sora, I'm a terrible cook. We both know it. The only thing I can make that's actually edible is ramen. You cook literally everything else, she reminded him. That's what happens when you grow up as the heir to a powerful clan. No one makes you learn how to cook things for yourself, she thought in annoyance. At least I learned how to do everything else I need to get by. I swear if I didn't constantly repair all of that man's clothes, he'd be walking around by now. You say that like there's something wrong with always eating ramen, he replied. There is for people who don't want to eat the same thing for every meal. Huh, something must be wrong with them. She sighed at him, right. Because clearly they're the ones who aren't normal, she agreed sarcastically. Anyway, it isn't just about the food. I also think that sometimes it's nice to leave the apartment and be like regular people for a little while. Regular people, huh? I guess we haven't really had a chance to be regular in a while, have we? It does sound nice. She smiled, but before she could say any more, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. And there's the other reason I wanted to come here. I'm glad I remembered the right restaurant name, she thought. Sora noticed as well, and waved as Asuma and his students came into view. Sora-san, Naomi-san. It's good to see you two again, Asuma said as he walked up to their table with his genin in tow. Asuma-san, she greeted with a nod. And these are your students, I take it. That's right. These are Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji, and Yamanaka Ino, he answered, introducing each in turn. It's nice to meet you, Sora said. After everything I keep hearing from Kakashi and Kurenai, I've been meaning to talk to you some more. I was especially curious when I heard you had a wind affinity, Sora-san, so I wanted to trade some tips with you since I'm a wind user myself. But, he looked around the room, I don't think a crowded restaurant is a great place for a conversation. Shikamaru yawned, people are already starting to give us odd looks, he confirmed. Also, we're hungry, sensei. Choji complained. You're hungry, Ino corrected, I'm on a diet. And even if we were somewhere better, Asuma continued with a sigh, I doubt these three would leave me alone long enough to have a conversation with you anyway. Sora chuckled, it's okay. I'd be happy to trade some ideas for wind techniques with you, Asuma-san. I haven't met anyone else in the village with a wind affinity, so that actually sounds really helpful. We're both leaving on missions tomorrow, though, so it may have to wait for a while. Asuma grinned, so you're finally starting on missions, then. I understand. Good luck, I hope we'll speak again when you two return. We will, Sora confirmed. With that, Asuma nodded and herded his team further into the restaurant. Naomi giggled once they were out of earshot, looks like we're getting popular. You're right, he agreed, though I'm not really sure why. They're probably curious, she replied with a shrug. It's not often that skilled ninja just show up unannounced at a village and offer their services with no strings attached. But if nothing else, at least it makes life more interesting to talk to everyone instead of hiding away at home. Sora smirked. It definitely does make things interesting, but I get the feeling that this is only the beginning. The next day Sora knelt in the living room, preparing his traveling supplies as Naomi did the same at his side. So I guess this is where things really start for us, isn't it? His wife nodded. It is, she answered curtly. Are you ready? Naomi paused, then nodded slowly. I think so. It's not that I'm really worried or anything. I just regret that I'm going to have to force my way inside. She sighed, unfortunately, it can't be helped. Maybe the guards will listen to you and let you inside without a fight. He ventured hopefully. Maybe, she conceded, but I won't hold my breath. Naomi glanced to her side at Sora. What about you? She asked. Are you sure you'll be okay? Sora looked away, hesitating for a moment. Honestly, I don't know. It was so long ago, but I've never really forgotten the way Haku and Zabuza died. They might have been my enemies, but still. Naomi laid a hand on his shoulder reassuringly, I know you'll do what you can to help them. Sora gave her a small smile, I just hope it's enough. He stood, hefting a knapsack full of supplies over a shoulder. Naomi stood as well and cupped a hand over his cheek, I know you've lived through this before, but be careful, okay, Naruto. Sora smiled warmly and leaned in to kiss her. After he pulled away, he noticed that she was blushing slightly. It's funny that she still does that sometimes, even after all these years. You can count on me, he promised. Good, because if you die on me, I'll never forgive you, Naomi warned. Sora grinned, I'll keep that in mind. He grasped her hand and gave it a squeeze, then the pair walked towards the door ready to go their separate ways. I understand why all of the summoned animals live hidden in the middle of nowhere, I really do, Naomi thought, but sometimes I wish they would pick places that weren't so hard to get to. She rubbed her eyes, I guess I should be happy it only took me a couple weeks to get here. If I'd been traveling to Myoboku this would have taken at least twice as long, and that'd only be if I'd remembered the right paths to take. It had been an exhausting trip, but Naomi had finally arrived at her destination, the Valley of the Kings. Or rather, she had arrived at its entrance. Her final destination was, in fact, on the other side of a treacherous and unstable mountain range, so unless she wanted to risk getting killed scaling the mountains, her only option was through a cave that served as the only reasonable entrance to the valley. Naomi let out a deep breath and forged inside the cave. It was an incredibly confusing and complex cave system, and if she hadn't been taught the way through years before, she wouldn't have had any hope of navigating it. Even still, she fumbled a few times and had to retrace her steps before she could move forward. After the better part of 2 hours, the cave finally began to widen as she neared her goal. As she moved forward, however, the silhouette she'd been expecting appeared to block her way. A human, a low voice growled, "You should not know of this place." The creature that stalked into view stood at a height that was slightly taller than her own with majestic gold fur. He padded over to stand right in front of her, his teeth bared threateningly. "What are you doing here?" it asked. To her credit, Naomi didn't flinch or back away. She knew that would only make things worse. After all, lions didn't respect weakness. "Hello, Cotter," she said simply. Cotter snarled, "Nor should you know my name. I will ask one last time, human. What are you doing here?" "You wouldn't believe me, even if I told you," she answered with a sigh. "I'm here to speak to someone." "Step aside, Cotter," she warned him. The lion roared, "Do not presume to order me about, human. I will give you this one chance to leave. If you do not take it, I will gut you for your insolence." Naomi shook her head. "You're welcome to try," she said softly. "So be it," Cotter said. He took a few steps back, then pounced at her. She dodged to the side. "You always were too stubborn for your own good," she admonished him. The lion snarled and lunged at her again, this time his claw grazing her right arm as she jumped away. She continued to dodge, careful to avoid his paws and teeth. "It's a good thing I've fought with Cotter before," she decided, "otherwise this would be a lot harder." She flipped away from him and took a stance as he turned to face her, activating her Byakugan at the same time. As soon as Cotter was within range, she struck out. 8 trigrams 64 palms. Lion dance. She flexed her hands, and chakra in the form of a lion surrounded both of her arms. 2 palms. 4 palms. 8 palms. 16 palms. 32 palms. Lion dance, final step, 64 palms. She finished, driving both of her hands into the lion's chest as the chakra surrounding her arms exploded forward. Cotter was blasted into the cave wall and dropped to the ground with a thud. "Damn you," he said weakly as he struggled, and failed, to stand back up. Naomi walked past him and raised a hand in farewell. "It was nice to see you again, Cotter," she told the lion. "Don't worry, I know the way." After that, she continued onward, walking boldly into the lion's den. So far, so good, Sora thought as he studied his past self's team fighting against Zabuza. Although Sora was intently focused on the battle, he was watching it in a way that he still wasn't accustomed to. Instead of watching from the safety of the treetops, Sora was hidden in some shrubs behind the cover of 10 meters of trees with his Byakugan activated. Naomi had been correct in her prediction that he would become proficient enough to keep the eye activated for long periods of time by the time he took on this mission. That did not mean that he was even close to mastering it, however. Within a few minutes of Sora's activation of the Byakugan, he began to experience splitting headaches. Further, he had yet to learn how to use the near 360 degrees vision to its full potential and had difficulty noticing some of what occurred around him if he was focused on something else. This was because even if he could technically see something that was happening near him, his mind still was unused to processing everything that occurred within his large sphere of vision. Naomi assured him that these problems would solve themselves over time, but with all of his knowledge of Team 7's history in Wave, Sora wasn't too worried about it at that moment. He knew that even if his current ability with the Byakugan was relatively weak, it was still a great asset to have for his current mission. Although the battle seemed to be going well, Sora was still a little concerned. He couldn't be certain as he didn't exactly remember many of the specifics of the fight, but what he did see made him feel as if things were slightly off. He could see it in the way that the genin seemed to act just a hair earlier or later than he thought they should. In how Sasuke seemed to stay closer to his teammates, a little bit less willing to charge off on his own. It was possible that his and Naomi's actions were the cause of these discrepancies. In fact, he was beginning to believe that their mere presence had an effect on those they came into contact with, regardless of their intentions. The way one thinks in battle, those brief flashes of memory, advice and experience that constantly go through one's mind, must be what's changed, he decided. And those differences are what are changing the actions that my teammates are taking during this fight as well. Thoughts were, by nature, fleeting things. The frantic thoughts that flitted through one's mind during combat were even more transitory. Because of the sheer magnitude of ideas that constantly raced through one's head at any given time, A few differences here or there would have very little impact on the outcome of any situation, especially if it was a battle. Since the changes he noticed only caused such minuscule variations, Sora wasn't sure if they would even have any real effect on the outcome of events to come in the first place, but he had to admit that, for better or worse, those changes were still there. Still, I barely notice anything different right now. We haven't really interacted that much with Team 7, so that makes sense. But if we keep spending time with them, he wondered, will that create even more of these small changes, or is this the extent of how our presence alone can influence things? Sora rubbed his eyes, and to add to that pile of questions, I still don't know why we never got reinforcements when we were fighting such dangerous missing nin. I saw Kakashi-sensei send messages a few times when no one was looking, so why didn't anyone come help us in my time? All of the other changes are so small, I'm not sure they're even there. Could we really have affected a decision as important as Sensei asking for help on a dangerous mission without even realizing it? Sora sighed, maybe I'll learn more after this fight now that they've come into contact with Zabuza. It's just too damn complicated to try and figure this all out by myself in the middle of this mission. As far as I can tell, this fight is going almost exactly like I remember it, so at the moment it doesn't really look like it matters that much anyway. Maybe Hinata can help me figure it out when I get back. Hopefully she's all right. Sora pushed his doubts to the corner of his mind and continued to watch the scene unfolding before him. I'm tired of this forest and its trees, Leah decided, they're far too constrictive. The lioness quietly prowled through the undergrowth of the dense forest that covered the southern part of the Valley of the Kings, waiting for a chance to strike at the human. Unfortunately, even after the past half an hour, no opportunity had presented itself. That didn't stop others from trying, however. 4 members of her pride had already noticed and brazenly attacked the human. None had achieved much success. Somehow, this strange woman seemed to be able to see them before they even struck. It was almost as if the human had eyes in the back of her head. But Leah was far too clever to make the mistake of attacking foolishly like the others. So she followed her, cool and calculating. Suddenly the human let out an audible sigh, turning towards Leah's direction. That's not going to work, you know, the woman said with a raised voice. Leah paused in confusion. Who is she talking to? She can't have possibly noticed me. Come out, Leah, the woman called. She did notice me, and somehow she even knows my name, Leah realized with a start. Leah had noticed that the woman acted as if she knew the other lions she'd fought, however Leah had assumed that it's some sort of trick. The lioness continued to wait for a few moments, just to be safe, before walking out of her hiding place to confront the human. How did you know? And for how long? She purred. The entire time, the human answered, and I saw you. Impossible. I made no mistakes, you should not have been able to see me. The woman just gestured to her eye and Leah noted the prominent veins sticking out around them. I see everything, she said with a smirk, it doesn't matter how well you hide. Leah paused and then cautiously padded forward a few more steps. Even if she was lying to Leah, this human was not to be underestimated, her defeat of the previous lions was evidence enough of that fact. I'm going to kill you now, she informed the human bluntly. By all means, the woman shrugged, you're welcome to try. She turned on her heels and began to walk in the direction she was heading in before at an unhurried pace. Is this human mocking me or is she just arrogant? Leah questioned. Though she was annoyed, she followed her instincts which warned her against immediately attacking. Leah padded after the human, unwilling to let the insult go completely unchallenged. She spoke again, you'd turn your back on an enemy. You must be either very confident or very foolish. I can still see you, Leah. Do not think that I've lowered my guard. Like I said before, you're welcome to try to attack me like the others did. The human shook her head in a rueful manner, and for your information, this human has a name. I am Uzumaki Hinata, she began before pausing in thought, though perhaps it would be best if you called me Naomi for now. To Leah's surprise, a small grin crossed the woman's face, and even though everyone has been threatening to kill me, I must admit that it has been nice to see all of you again. Especially you. Stop speaking in riddles. I have never met you before, nor have any of the others, Leah growled. I apologize. I didn't mean to upset you. Naomi said quickly. Her tone became wistful. I know you've never met me and don't know who I am, but still, I've met you. Or at least a girl very much like me would have met you if I did not come here first. This human disturbed our home, attacked anyone who got in her way, and sounds like a madwoman, yet for some reason she speaks as if she's still our ally and apologizes for angering me. I do not understand. Confused by Naomi's odd statements, Leah continued to follow after the woman for a few minutes. As Leah was still skeptical of Naomi's true intentions, she was careful to continue searching for any openings she may be able to exploit if she needed to attack. Where are you going? Leah finally asked once her curiosity became too much to ignore. To talk to your brother, Naomi replied curtly. The lioness snorted, you're looking for Zane. If you seek our alpha willingly, you truly are a fool after all. If I do not kill you first, he most certainly will, Leah warned. Naomi chuckled, again with the death threats. Sometimes I forget how blunt you can be. She shrugged, we both know that since he's your leader, your brother will speak with me so long as I don't attack him first. If nothing else, he has a responsibility to learn how I know so much about your pride. Naomi turned to look at her, so we're clear, I don't actually plan to fight you too. I really did just come here to talk. Tell that to Cotter and the others, Leah shot back. I told them not to attack me, Naomi said, shaking her head. If it makes you feel better, I avoided hurting any of them too badly. They'll be fine within a day or two. After some hesitation Leah nodded. Since she hadn't had time to check on any of her friends after they were defeated, Leah had been worried about their injuries. Honestly, despite Naomi's seemingly kind words during their conversation, the lioness had not expected this human to be so merciful to those who attacked her. Naomi stopped halfway towards the part of the valley that Leah's brother lived in and began to smile. It looks like he caught wind of me faster than I expected. Leah stopped a few meters behind Naomi, frowning for a few moments until she noticed a large shadow moving towards them. The lion that appeared before the pair was completely different from the ones that had recklessly attacked Naomi before. He was strong, of that there was no doubt, but there was something more to him that had nothing to do with raw power. He had a talent for command and an air of regularity that Leah had seen few others come even close to matching during her lifetime. Human, Zane addressed Naomi, foregoing any pleasantries. He turned his gaze to the lioness, and Leah. Are you unharmed? She nodded in answer to his question, I am. I thought it best not to attack like the others. A wise choice, he agreed. Zane stepped closer to Naomi before speaking again. Human, you have trespassed in our home, a place none should know about. Furthermore, you have fought and incapacitated my brethren. These actions are enough to gain a measure of my respect. However, he leaned in closer to Naomi, baring his teeth, I would know how you have gained this knowledge and why you are here. Leah was impressed when Naomi did not back away. It would have been a sign of weakness, true, but she knew of few who were brave enough to stand their ground against her brother. Naomi's head bobbed in acknowledgement and there was a burst of smoke. In the place of the silver-haired woman from before was a completely different person. Leah could not tell all of the changes from behind the woman, but she could not help but notice the dark blue hair that now graced Naomi's back. Very well. Let me introduce myself. I am Uzumaki Hinata, though for now you would be better off calling me Naomi, the woman began, since I know that none of us enjoy wasting our time, I'll get right to the point. The reason why I know so much about your pride and of the location of this valley is that I signed a summoning contract with you. Zane eyed her, we have not forged a contract with any of your kind in decades. Nor would you for a few more years if I had not come here myself. I signed a contract with you about 6 years from now in the future. Leah shook her head, and so what? You're trying to tell us you can predict the future. No, she said. As Naomi turned to face Leah, the lioness was startled by the stark white eyes that weren't visible until she'd released her transformation, I'm from the future. Ridiculous. Leah thought. That entire explanation is absurd. There would be no reason for us to create a contract with a human in the future, and that's not even taking into account the impossibility of you traveling through time in the first place. A few months ago, I would have agreed with you about this entire situation being impossible, Naomi said with a sigh, but for better or worse, here I am. Even if the specifics are a bit complex, she added, as for the reason the lions would form a contract with me, well, let's just say that many things change when the world is falling apart. Leah was about to respond to Naomi when her brother held up a paw to silence her. To her surprise, Zane didn't scoff at the impossibility of the human's declaration as she had. He brought his head in front of Naomi, stared at her for a few long moments, and whispered, "Prove it." For several long minutes nothing else was said. As she was still behind Naomi, Leah couldn't even read the woman's facial expressions. After another few moments, however, something Leah would have never predicted happened. Zane's eyes grew wide and he slowly backed away in shock. "This is, you, how?" Zane struggled to form a response. "I take it this proves my point?" Naomi asked, though her voice sounded slightly different than before. It sounded more animalistic, almost like Leah's own voice. It does. It would have been impossible for you to take that form without our help." Leah frowned, Zane's surprised. "And he believes her. What in the world did she?" Naomi turned to face her, and Leah was frozen by shock as well. The woman's eyes, which had previously been completely white, were now entirely gold, with the exception of a solid black pupil in their center. Covering the bottom of each of her eyes was a distinctive, light blue, markings in the shape of a crescent. Leah backed away. "What the hell are you?" she asked, bewildered. "I think you know," Naomi purred. She sniffed the air for a moment, taking advantage of the enhanced sense of smell Leah knew the human now possessed. "Is that the scent of fear in the air? Come now, there's no need to be worried." "It is not you that worries me, human," Leah countered. "It is what your existence means for my pride that scares me." Naomi lowered her eyes. "It means a chance at survival. Trust me, someday you will be thankful I came here." Leah shivered. "Perhaps, but for now it appears that I must believe you, so I won't be killing you. Not today at least." Naomi smiled at her before Zane's commanding voice brought their attention back to him. "It seems that we have much to talk about," the lion told them both. "Come with me and you can tell us your whole story, Naomi-san," he finished, calling the woman by name for the first time since they'd met. As Zane walked away, Naomi turned her attention back to Leah. Suddenly, a feral grin appeared on her face. "Well, let's go get started, partner," she said with a wink before following after Zane, confused once again as she watched Naomi walk away. Partner. Sora crept quietly through the trees, tailing Kakashi, Sasuke and Sakura as they headed towards the bridge on the day that Zabuza was planning to ambush them. Though Sora was tracking them with his Byakugan, he would be unable to do so when they reached the bridge. His range simply wasn't large enough yet. Still, by using Zabuza's mist as cover, he should be able to get close enough to watch the fight without being spotted, even if the bridge did have relatively few places to hide. He had been watching Team 7 for the past week, keeping an eye on them before their rematch with Zabuza and Haku. Overall, the week had passed much as he'd remembered it, with Kakashi recovering from the first battle while the three genin training. The only real difference Sora noticed was Naruto's willingness to share Sakura's tree-climbing advice with Sasuke. It seemed that Naomi's words about teamwork after her spar with Sasuke had even managed to reach Naruto. Not that sharing a single piece of advice was reason enough to think that the two boys were suddenly friends. Despite the fact that Sora hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary, though, something was still bothering him. He had the feeling that there was something he was missing. Something important. Because of this worry, Sora was being cautious, perhaps overly so, but he didn't want to take any more chances than necessary. That was the reason why he'd left a pair of shadow clones to watch over the resting Naruto, and to make sure he arrived at the battle on the bridge in time if some unforeseen incident slowed him down. "I'll be glad when this is finally over," Sora thought. "I just can't seem to shake this foreboding feeling." Sora continued to follow the three members of Team 7 until the edge of the forest. To avoid being noticed, he gave the team of ninja a head start to move farther down the bridge before he himself entered the mist. Just as Sora was about to drop from his perch, a voice rang in his mind. "Naruto!" Kurama suddenly shouted within his mind. Sora frowned. "Kurama, what's wrong? Focus on your vision to the right, you idiot." "What? I don't know what you're talking." Sora froze mid-sentence as he saw what Kurama was talking about. This was when the realization hit him, he'd been a fool. Sora had been so wrapped up in his knowledge of the future that he never really considered that there may have been important parts and aspects of events that he didn't know about. He now understood why Team 7 never received reinforcements from the Leaf when they'd fought Zabuza. It wasn't that Kakashi was irresponsible or because Konoha didn't have anyone to spare, it was because the messages never arrived. They'd been intercepted by the hooded figure, hidden within the trees, who was watching as Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura drifted further into the mist. Sora had been so focused on his friends that he hadn't noticed the figure in the far edge of his vision until Kurama had called out to him. He gritted his teeth. Just because I can see everything around me, doesn't mean I have the skill to notice and keep track of it all, Sora reminded himself. The figure began to slink forward and Sora realized that he planned to hide in the mist to observe the battle as well. After all, if he was planning to attack them, he would have done so in Sora's original timeline as well. I don't know what's going on here, but since I don't know how he'll react when I interfere, I can't just sit around and ignore this, changes to the timeline or not, Sora decided. I'll have to take him down as quickly as possible. Besides, who knows how many headaches this bastard caused us in my time. Maybe if I can capture this guy here, it could even give me an edge. Mind made up, Sora quickly made 5 shadow clones to watch over Team 7 in case he was too preoccupied with this spy to do so himself. He flew from his perch, quietly rushing to stop the figure from getting out of the forest where he could keep a potential fight hidden more easily. Sora reached the figure in less than 10 seconds, dropping silently to the ground behind them. The redhead deactivated his Byakugan, then he flipped out his daggers and surged forward, determined to incapacitate the figure before they could react. Just as he got within striking range, however, a pair of spears shot out of the figure's back. Sora twisted in the air and used a burst of wind to throw himself to the right moments before he would have been impaled. Sora skidded along the ground as he was blown away from the counter-attack. He looked up, and his eyes widened in surprise. Those aren't spears, they're bones. The figure turned around slowly, removing the hood from his head. Sora studied the man's face, recognizing him, but what really caught his attention the seal on the man's chest, just below his neck. Sora's eyes narrowed. Sasuke had told him the name of this man once before. Kimimaro. So that snake Orochimaru is the one behind this, he growled inwardly. Kimimaro didn't bother to speak as he produced a bone from his palm and moved to attack. Is he faster than I remember? Sora wondered as he dodged the spear-like bone jutting out of Kimimaro's right palm. Then a vague memory surfaced in his mind. That's right, Sasuke said he was sick when I fought him, didn't he? That explains it. Dance of the Willow, Kimimaro whispered, producing another bone from his left palm and bringing it around to attack from the side. Sora gritted his teeth as he parried the bone with one of his daggers. It seems like he's stronger too, this might be difficult. Sora cursed his luck. His first real fight since he'd traveled back in time and he was forced to go up against Kimimaro, a close combat specialist with incredible offensive and defensive capabilities because of his Kekkei Genkai. Normally Sora would have been confident that he could defeat Kimimaro, even if the man had only been killed by an illness in Sora's original time. Unfortunately, this situation was far from normal. Because he was erring on the side of caution, Sora wouldn't use his Rasengan, Sage Mode, or Byakugan unless someone's life absolutely depended on it, which deprived him of some of his strongest techniques. While he could attempt to create shadow clones like in his first fight with Kimimaro, he doubted they would do much good since they couldn't use his wind-walking technique. The sheer amount of chakra he would have to give each of the clones to continuously use the technique, coupled together with the fact that having multiple clones constantly generating different wind currents would interfere with Sora's own wind bursts, simply made it too dangerous and impractical. Still, Sora had an advantage. While he had wanted to avoid attention until now, he was planning to reveal himself on the bridge at some point or another to swing events in his favor, whereas Kimimaro was most likely under strict orders to avoid being seen at all costs. It wasn't much of an edge since he only wanted to interfere with the fight on the bridge, not bring Kimimaro there, but still it was something. Kimimaro spun, shooting a bone out of his elbow towards Sora's head, coming within a few centimeters of his face. Then he raised his knee, creating another weapon as he aimed for Sora's midsection that Sora parried away. Kimimaro continued to move like this, his body flowing smoothly from one attack to the next, though he was unable to land a clean blow. As Kimimaro drew his palm back for another attack, Sora jumped backwards, readying his knives, then blasted himself back towards his opponent with a gust of wind. Kimimaro reacted almost instantly, creating a thick bone between his two hands to block the strike. Sora did not back down, however, and as he closed in, he poured his wind chakra into his daggers. Steel met bone, and for a fraction of a second, Kimimaro's block held. Then Sora's knives began to cut through Kimimaro's guard, and he was forced to jump away just as his bone was sliced apart. Those bones are strong, Sora thought, eyeing Kimimaro, looks like I'll have to put in more chakra next time. Kimimaro stood calmly and seemed to study Sora for a moment. You're stronger than I expected, he said, speaking for the first time. Who are you? What is your purpose here? Sora scoffed, but kept his guard up, still wary of the man. How much of a fool do you think I am? I'm not going to answer any of your questions. The man simply nodded, seemingly unoffended. I see, very well then. Still, I do not have time to waste, so I will end this battle here. The tattoo on Kimimaro's chest began to glow and spread across his body. As soon as Sora realized what Kimimaro was doing, he shot forward, trying to take advantage of the small opening. Kimimaro was too quick, however, jumping backwards as his left arm slumped to the side and his other hand reached over to pull out a short sword made of bone. Just as Sora caught up with him, Kimimaro parried Sora's attack with his new sword. The man was faster and stronger than before thanks to the release of his cursed seal. Dance of the Camellia, Kimimaro said, as he launched a counter-attack. Kimimaro's blade shot out at Sora, who knocked the sword away with one of his knives. Kimimaro pressed his attack, his weapon moving so fast that it almost seemed to flicker as he continually stabbed at Sora. Sora changed tactics, jumping backwards. Raiden, he began as one of his knives began to spark with electricity. Futon, he continued, a current of wind began to twist around his other blade. Storm, Sora yelled, slashing forward with both of his knives in the direction Kimimaro. Twin arcs, one of electricity and another of wind, flew into Kimimaro, who was barely able to block with his sword, knocking him backwards. Sora didn't let up as Kimimaro regained his footing. He continued to hurl deadly crescents of wind and electricity at his opponent. Kimimaro was forced onto the defensive and he backed away, dodging and blocking the attacks, though he was still clipped by a few of them. After nearly a minute, Kimimaro was finally made a mistake. The man was caught in the midsection by one of the arcs of wind and he was thrown into a tree, his sword flying out of his hand. Seeing an opportunity, Sora ceased his long-ranged attacks and he ran towards Kimimaro, reaching him just before he recovered. Sora slashed downward at Kimimaro, but his blade was caught on one of the many bones that suddenly shot out of Kimimaro's body with no warning. Dance of the Larch, Kimimaro said. Though he'd managed to avoid a finishing blow, the man was hurt. He was bleeding and singed in several places. It appeared, however, that he had avoided any significant injuries as Sora could see a shield of bone covering his innards, visible underneath the tears in his skin. I underestimated you, Kimimaro admitted, but this ends now. Kimimaro's curse mark began to glow once again as it spread even further across his body, causing Sora to back away cautiously. Kimimaro's body began to change, his skin darkening to a purplish gray and prominent markings appearing around his eyes. His eyes themselves changed as well, the sclera becoming black while his irises changed to a golden color. Finally, his body began to contort slightly as large bones began to jut out of his back end. Even more noticeably, a large tail began to grow from the base of his spine and extended until it was 1.5 meters long. He's releasing his seal again. Sora thought, damn it. The fight on the bridge will be ending soon and I don't know if a few clones can stop it without anyone dying. There's no more time to deal with this bastard anymore, but I can't just let him get away. Dance of the Clematis, Flower, Kimimaro said, a drill-like weapon forming around his hand. Then the man began to charge. Sora made a choice, took a deep breath, and readied himself. I hope I'm making the right choice, he thought as he sheathed his daggers. Sora began forming hand seals and the air began to swirl around him, its currents moving faster and faster. It may not have been the way he'd have preferred, but one way or another he was going to end this. Your future is death, Kakashi declared, his Reikiri crackling in his palm. Kakashi ran, sprinting across the gap between him and Zabuza in mere moments. He thrust out his hand to deliver the killing blow. Then something happened. A mirror made of ice appeared out of nowhere, and a boy, Zabuza's companion, stepped out of it. No, Kakashi thought. He tried to slow down, but it was too late. Kakashi was already moving so fast that he wouldn't be able to change his momentum in time. Suddenly, Kakashi was pushed back, slowed down by an unnatural gust of wind. Then 5 men appeared out of the mist. Kakashi was moving so fast that his Sharingan was the only reason he even noticed the men at all through the thick mist. 4 of the men grabbed Kakashi's arms while the last man pushed Zabuza's companion out of the way of Kakashi's attack as he was being slowed by the others. Even with 4 men holding his arms, Kakashi continued forward, his Raikiri smashing into the ice mirror, though he did not reach Zabuza. If Kakashi had not already been trying to stop himself earlier, he doubted Zabuza would have survived, even with 4 men slowing him down. The copy ninja jumped far backwards instinctively, mind-reeling in an effort to catch up with what had just happened in the past few seconds. That, a familiar voice said with a slight huff as the 5 men moved into Kakashi's line of sight, was too close. It can't be. Kakashi looked around, trying to see past the mist to focus on the man who had spoken. Recognizing the speaker and, now that he had come to a stop, finally noticing that all 5 of the men around him were identical, Kakashi breathed a sigh of relief. Sora-san. What the moment his attack had been deflected, he'd been expecting another enemy, not an ally. He certainly hadn't been expecting his new friend to appear of all people. Kakashi was even more surprised that Sora had stopped his attack when he had been heading towards someone who was obviously an enemy. The entire situation was confusing and a little suspicious. There should have been no way for Sora to know that he had been trying to stop himself from hurting the child who had protected Zabuza. Questions later, Kakashi, Sora said, cutting him off before he could speak again. The man had an air of nervousness about him. You need to get everyone away from here, we don't know how well the original is doing against him. Against who? What do you mean? Just as the clone opened his mouth to speak, a sword cleaved through him and another clone, turning them both into puffs of smoke. Crap! One of the clones yelled as the 3 survivors leapt to stand next to Kakashi. With their focus on a dire-sounding conversation in the mist obscuring their vision, neither Kakashi, nor Sora's clones, had noticed that the jutsu that had been binding Zabuza had ended. Good job, Haku, Zabuza said, now get up. Yes, Zabuza-san, Haku replied. His voice almost sounded guilty. Still, despite the trace of emotion in his voice, the boy struggled to his feet. Even though Kakashi was only able to make out a vague silhouette of Haku, he could tell by the boy's posture and ragged voice that he was probably injured. Most likely as a product of the boy's fight with Naruto and Sasuke. A surge of worry overtook Kakashi and he was hit with a strong desire to go check on his students. If Haku was here, what had happened to Naruto and Sasuke? Still, he couldn't risk turning his back to Zabuza. If the man managed to get past Kakashi and the clones, his students were as good as dead. Zabuza pointed his sword at Sora's clones. I don't know who you are, but thank you for being stupid enough to save my precious tool and stop Kakashi's attack. I stopped his attack because that kid jumped in front of you, one of the clones countered. Anyway, we have a bigger problem on our hands. We need to. He was interrupted by a howl of noise. It sounded as if a hurricane had appeared out of nowhere. All of the clones cursed at once. We're too late, one of them said quietly. Before Kakashi could even begin to guess what the clone was talking about, a large pocket of mist near the forest was blown away as a twisting mass of wind erupted from the trees and flew towards the bridge. As the wind drew closer, Kakashi noticed that it was in the vague outline of a dragon and that it, even more surprisingly, held a hulking form in its jaws. As it neared the bridge, the dragon made of wind flew high into the air before turning downward, crashing itself, and its victim, into the bridge, creating a large crater and throwing up bits of wood and stone. As the dust began to settle, a red-haired figure darted past the crater and came to a stop next to Kakashi and the 3 clones. Hey there, Kakashi-san, Sora said, sorry I'm late. Sora took a moment to the situation, glad that he'd managed to arrive when he did. From the memories he'd received from his destroyed clones, it seemed that while they'd been able to save Haku, they hadn't been able to actually stop the fight itself. So if nothing else, at least throwing Kimimaro into the fight would stop Zabuza and Kakashi from trying to kill each other for the next few minutes. As the mist around them began to fade away, Kimimaro slowly rose and began to look at his surroundings. Kakashi got into a defensive stance as he got a closer look at the inhuman form that had just crashed into the middle of the bridge. Another enemy? Kakashi asked coolly. Yeah, don't go near him unless you have to. He's dangerous, but if we work together it shouldn't be a problem. And maybe you and Zabuza won't want to kill each other afterwards, he added to himself. Who the hell is that? Zabuza asked. The man looked like he didn't want to risk another attack just yet. Another of you Leaf Ninja. I just smashed him into a bridge, what do you think? Sora snapped. Maybe if you hadn't been so busy swinging your sword around, I'd have told you what I know about him by now. If he's not with Zabuza, then where did he come from? Kakashi asked, ignoring their fighting. Kakashi-sensei, a despondent voice called, interrupting the conversation. And, Sora-Nisan, is that you? Everyone glanced over to see Naruto walking towards them. Naruto. Kakashi asked, are you alright? The boy shook his head, no. I mean yes, I'm okay. It's Sasuke. Naruto seemed to struggle with his words, he's dead Kakashi-sensei. He died protecting me from Haku. Kakashi's eyes widened. Sasuke, he whispered. He turned to look at Haku and Zabuza, but the boy simply looked away. However, Sora noticed Kakashi's gaze was focused on Zabuza. He clearly blamed the swordsman for Sasuke's apparent death instead of Haku himself. Sora noticed that Kimimaro was frowning as his eyes seemed to linger on three figures off to the side, one of which lay unmoving on the ground, covered by a sobbing young girl. It appears that you are telling the truth, boy, Kimimaro finally said. Something within Sora's mind clicked and his eyes widened. Until now, he'd been so preoccupied with fighting Kimimaro that he hadn't had enough time to really consider why the man was even there in the first place. Of course, he's here to observe Sasuke. Sora thought. It was so obvious. He should have figured it out earlier. At the moment, however, Sasuke appeared dead to all who saw him. Since Kimimaro had been exposed and believed his target was dead, Sora could easily guess the man's next course of action. He's just going to try and kill everyone here, Sora realized with a chill. Kimimaro thrust an arm into the ground. Sora! Kakashi yelled, running towards Sakura and the others. On it, Sora picked up Naruto and leapt away from Kimimaro. At the same time, his three remaining shadow clones went to help Kakashi carry Sasuke, Sakura and Tazuna away from the battlefield. An unexpected explosion sounded from behind him. Sora looked back and saw a small plume of smoke swirling around Kimimaro's position. Did I get him? Naruto asked from beneath his arm. Well, at least he didn't blow himself up with those explosive tags, Sora thought with a smirk. Nice try, but I think it'll take more than a small explosion to bring that guy down. Dance of the Seedling Fern. A voice rang out in confirmation. The bridge began to rumble and Sora was forced to concentrate on dodging as a multitude of bone spires began to erupt from the ground. He bobbed and weaved, using the ground and even some of the spikes themselves, to keep himself and Naruto out of harm's way. I hate this guy, Sora complained as one of the spikes came within a few hairs of the boy he was carrying. These techniques are ridiculous. After a few more tense seconds the attack came to an end. Sora slid to a stop and scanned his surroundings. The entire bridge was covered in the spires, though thankfully they didn't impact his line of sight too much. From what he could see, aside from two of his clones, everyone had made it through the attack relatively unscathed, even Zabuza and Haku. Unfortunately, Kimimaro was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, Sora heard a sound and turned around, coming face to face with his opponent. What the hell? He thought as Kimimaro slashed towards him with a pair of swords. He dodged, careful to avoid dropping his younger self, and looked up just in time to see Kimimaro meld into one of his spikes. He can move into and out of those spikes, Sora shouted, look out. He dropped Naruto beside him. Stay close to me, he commanded as he started scanning the bridge, watching for an attack that could come from any direction. Where is he? Sora wondered. After a few tense moments, memories flooded him as his last shadow clone, the one that had carried the supposedly lifeless Sasuke's body to safety, was destroyed. Thankfully, the boy himself was unscathed and Kimimaro would focus on attacking his opponents before turning his attention to someone he thought was dead. Another few seconds passed and Sora heard the clang of steel from his left. Turning, he saw Zabuza defending against an attack with his massive sword. After the exchange of a few more blows, Kimimaro retreated into one of his spikes, regaining the element of surprise. This same scene continued to play out over the next 10 minutes as Kimimaro randomly attacked different members of the group from unpredictable directions. He would suddenly appear, stabbing with a drill, slashing with a sword, or even shooting parts of his finger bones to try to kill his opponents. He showed no mercy, attacking even the young Naruto, Sakura, and Tazuna, though he attacked the three less often than the rest of the group since he probably saw them as weak links. As the battle dragged on without either side gaining much of an advantage, Sora began to grow more and more concerned. While Kakashi and Zabuza were both capable ninja in their own right, they were both so damaged and exhausted from their own battle with each other that they had difficulty keeping up with Kimimaro since, despite all of the punishment he'd taken, the man's bone armor had saved him from having much more than a few minor injuries that barely slowed him down. Furthermore, the two men were burdened even further because they had to protect those around them. While the fact that Kimimaro had ignored Sakura and Tazuna for the most part meant Kakashi could defend the two from the occasional attack without too much difficulty, he was severely limited by the fact that he had to look out for two people at the same time. Haku, on the other hand, was much harder to defend. He was so injured from his fight with Sasuke and a Kyuubi-empowered Naruto that he had trouble even dodging Kimimaro at all, having to be saved by Zabuza more than once. Sora wasn't certain why Kimimaro focused on the boy, since his injuries were obvious, but perhaps the man knew that Haku actually had the skill to prove a possible threat to him, even if it was only minor threat in his current state. Either way, the man had taken advantage of Haku's weakness, instead of largely ignoring him as he did Sakura, Naruto and Tazuna. This isn't good, Sora muttered to himself, watching as Kimimaro faded away after an attack on Kakashi's group. Unless we end this soon someone's going to. Haku! Naruto yelled from his side. Sora's head whipped around just in time to see Haku fly backwards, pushed away from Kimimaro's incoming drill-like weapon by the flat of Zabuza's great sword. This act, however, put Zabuza in the path of the attack instead, and Kimimaro was so close that Zabuza wouldn't have enough time to reposition his sword to properly parry the blow. He directed a final, desperate, slash at Kimimaro, and while it left a deep gash, it wasn't enough. No, Sora thought in horror, watching helplessly as Zabuza was run through. What the hell did I do that for? Zabuza wondered as he fell towards the ground, his sword dropping out of his hand. He didn't feel any pain as he hit the floor. In fact, he could barely feel anything at all. Zabuza was dying, he could already feel himself slipping away. At least he'd managed to force his monster of an opponent back, he noted with satisfaction as he saw the mysterious ninja retreat. So this is it, huh? It was funny. After all of those years only looking out for himself, first as a ninja of the mist and then later as a sword for hire, he would meet his end protecting someone else. Someone he had claimed to be his tool, no less. He still wasn't sure why he did it. Perhaps it was that moment, just minutes ago, when he was certain Haku would die protecting him from Kakashi's attack that sparked the protective desire in Zabuza. Perhaps he had always cared for Haku enough to die for him. All he knew was that his body had moved of its own volition before his mind had even had a chance to register what was happening. It didn't really matter now. As his sight began to dim, he noticed Haku kneeling by his side with tears in his eyes. The boy was yelling something, but by this point Zabuza couldn't even begin to make out his words, let alone respond to them. Sorry Haku, but it looks like you're on your own now, Zabuza silently apologized. Just as his thoughts themselves began to slow, Zabuza decided something, he had no regrets in giving up his life for Haku's. In fact, he was happy to die in his place. Perhaps now, at least, the boy would be able to find a life of his own that didn't require him to fight and kill for someone else's selfish desires. What a soft fool that kid turned me into, Zabuza thought, and I didn't even notice until now. The man howled with laughter inside of his head at the realization. A small, unseen, smile appeared under his mask as the world finally faded away. Damn it, what the hell was I thinking? Sora cursed at himself. He knew there was no way Zabuza could have survived that attack. Not when it had ripped a hole right through the middle of his chest. The worst part was that Sora could have easily prevented his death if he hadn't been so worried about hiding some of his abilities. I may not have had enough time to go into Sage mode, he thought, but if I'd just used the Rasengan against Kimimaro, or even my Byakugan once that bastard had begun appearing out of all those spikes, maybe I could have. Sora cut himself off with a forceful shake of the head. No, there's no use thinking about this now. Besides, I need to keep the bigger picture in mind. I can't just go around revealing my secrets just to save one or two people I barely know. I need to stay focused. I need to remember why I came here in the first place. I need to. And then Sora noticed a slight distortion in one of the spikes near Kakashi, bringing him out of his reverie. Time seemed to slow as Sora took in the scene. Halfway across the bridge from him, Kimimaro was just beginning to emerge from one of his pillars of bone, with Sakura in his sights. He saw Kakashi turn in surprise and begin to move towards her, shouting at the girl to run, but he knew the man wouldn't be able to get to her in time. A memory flashed through his mind, a pink-haired girl, dead in Sasuke's arms. Sora hadn't even been able to help comfort her as she passed. He'd never forgiven himself for it. Unlike when he'd watched Kimimaro's deadly attack against Zabuza, Sora knew that there might be enough time for him to save the girl, but only if he did something incredibly stupid and was extremely lucky. He clenched his fists and made his choice. It wasn't as if he could bring himself to make any other decision anyway, regardless of his plan or the consequences of his actions. One death was more than enough. He wouldn't let Sakura die too. He couldn't. Not again. Sora gritted his teeth and blasted himself towards Kimimaro with a violent gust of wind. In most fights, Sora's wind-walking technique had the potential to be far more versatile than the Hiraishin as it enabled one to move in any direction they wished without any preparation. However, this advantage came at a cost. While the Hiraishin may allow one to teleport across the battlefield to a specific seal without expending much energy, that same distance could be much more taxing through wind-walking because, unlike the technique his father had perfected, wind-walking didn't actually teleport its user to a pre-chosen area. Instead it moved them across that distance physically. This high-speed movement took a heavy toll on one's body, and controlling the necessary wind currents for the technique required a great deal of energy and skill. This was the main reason that Sora limited himself to short bursts of movement. It wasn't that his technique didn't allow one to move farther or faster than the small bursts Sora used it for. In fact, he knew that he could theoretically move kilometers with his technique in one burst. No, the real problem was that no one's body, not even his, could be made to endure moving at such a high speed for very long. If he pushed himself too much, he could easily kill himself. To make matters worse, the technique was so draining that he could have trouble fighting after using it recklessly, even if he did manage to survive moving a far distance. Finally, the speed of his movement during these bursts restricted the way he could safely attack. This was due to the fact that he needed to slow himself before striking if he wanted to avoid injuring himself with the recoil from hitting someone at his maximum velocity. All of these explanations flew briefly through Sora's mind, as if the logical part of him was trying to remind him of the danger of what he was attempting. He ignored it. It only took a couple meters of travel before pain began to shoot through his body, the sheer speed of his movement beginning to take its toll. After another few meters, his bones began to crack and he could feel his chakra draining away at an alarming rate, though his stamina was great enough that he could ignore it for a short while longer. Sora ignored all of these signs, concentrating on the figure that was drawing closer to his former teammate, a drill made of bone covering his opponent's left arm. Sora created a gust of wind from the opposite direction to quickly decelerate his movement, causing him to feel like he'd slammed into a brick wall. He could feel small fractures in his left arm and the cracking of a few additional ribs. Sora ignored this as he skidded to a stop right between Kimimaro and Sakura. Instead he let his reflexes take over, creating a ball of energy in his right hand. "Get away from her," he yelled, kicking off the ground and thrusting his arm towards his opponent. Kimimaro seemed to stare at him for a fraction of a second, looking as if he couldn't believe that Sora had crossed half the battlefield in the blink of an eye. He soon pulled himself together, however, and raised his weapon to block Sora's attack. For a moment, Kimamaro's weapon held, but after a few seconds it began to crack and weaken. Finally, Sora's Rasengan burst through Kimamaro's defense. Sora let his momentum carry him forward and he took the sound ninja's left arm off at the elbow before coming to a stop a few meters away. "Reikiri!" A voice yelled from behind him. Sora glanced back in time to witness Kakashi's finishing blow to an exposed Kimamaro, hitting him in the stomach. After Kakashi's attack sparked away, the sound ninja took a shaky step forward, teetered for a second, and then fell backwards onto the ground. A few moments later, his curse-sealed transformation began to drain away. Kakashi's attack probably wouldn't quite kill the man, he knew a valuable prisoner when he saw one, but it would ensure that Kimamaro was out of commission long enough stabilize his condition and secure him for transport back to the village. After what their opponent had managed survive so far, Sora was glad that Kakashi wasn't taking any chances. He smiled in grim satisfaction for a moment before falling to a knee, clutching his side. "Thanks Uzumaki-san, Kakashi-sensei," Sakura said, face white. Kakashi smiled at her, and then glanced around at the other survivors of the group before turning his attention to Sora. "Are you alright?" Kakashi asked, still standing over the downed Kimamaro. Sora nodded. "Yeah. Just a few cracked ribs and fractures. I'll be okay," he confirmed as he pushed himself to his feet. "Just getting a reminder of exactly why I only use wind walking for short bursts. Most of the damage I've taken was from that stunt I just pulled." Kakashi watched him for a few more seconds. He looked as if he was about to voice the question they both knew he had on his mind. Thankfully, however, the man simply nodded, pushing his curiosity aside for later. Sora looked over to where Zabuza's prone body lay and shook his head somberly. "For what it's worth, Zabuza, I really am sorry things turned out this way," he thought, feeling guilty. He let out a sigh and went over to stand next to Kakashi. "So what do you think we should do with him?" Sora asked. "We can't just keep him here until you finish your mission." "You're right. Once they've recovered, I'll send Sakura and Naruto with you to take him back." Kakashi turned to look over at Sasuke's prone form. "I think I should get them away from here. This was too much for a few genin to handle." "He's not dead," a quiet voice told them. The pair turned around to face Haku, who was being supported by Naruto and looked even worse than he had just a few minutes ago. Disbelief and a hint of hope showed in Kakashi's expression, while Sora feigned the same. "What do you mean?" Kakashi asked skeptically. "I mean that I didn't kill him. There was no reason to." Haku admitted. He gestured to the side at a slowly moving Sasuke. Sakura covered a gasp before anxiously running towards her teammate, Tazuna following behind her in case she needed help with the boy. Kakashi let out a deep breath. "Thank God," he whispered. "But," Haku whispered, pointing at Kimamaro, "I will kill him." "No," Kakashi said forcefully. "We're taking him to Konoha for interrogation. He killed Zabuza-san. Zabuza-san, he died because of me. Because I was weak. If this man lives, how can Zabuza-san be avenged?" Haku took half a step towards Kakashi, but then stumbled, falling to his knees in exhaustion. "Zabuza-san." Naruto put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry Haku, you'll get through this. I'm your friend, I'll be here for you," he said, trying to comfort the boy. Kakashi looked to be sympathetic, but did not budge from his position. "Please Haku," Sora pleaded, "please be strong." It seems that even now, Kimamaro suddenly rasped, drawing the group's attention, "My failures continue to be compounded further." He ignored everyone else and focused on Sora. "Will you now tell me who you are?" Sora sighed. He supposed telling the man his name didn't matter much now that Kimamaro was defeated, especially considering the fact that it was fake. "Uzumaki Sora," he said finally. "I see. In Uzumaki, your clan is like mine, dead or scattered to wind." He seemed to stare at Sora as if he was considering something. "And you, as we fought, I realized that you're like me. I can see in your eyes that you're someone who has lost everything, who cherishes the few things that still give them purpose." Sora stared at the man, feeling a twinge of pity. "Yes, perhaps you can understand me." A grim smile came to his face, "But even though you've defeated me, you will never stop him," Kimamaro finished in a confident tone, closing his eyes. "Unfortunately for you, you shall gain nothing more from my failure." "Dance," he began, causing everyone to jump away from him, of the Zinnia. The group backed up even further in preparation, readying for a final attack. However, nothing came. Instead, a simple spike of bone burst through Kimamaro's chest, right where his heart was. The man let out a sharp breath, and then fell still. After a few moments, Kakashi sighed as he slipped his headband back over his Sharingan. Crazy bastard. I guess it would be too much to ask to bring him back home alive, wouldn't it? Sora kneeled next to Kimamaro's corpse, producing a large scroll from his haori. I can seal his body away at the very least, he informed the Jonin as he began to form a few hand signs. Maybe that will give us a clue as to who he's working with. As he finished sealing the corpse into the scroll, he took a second to glance over at Haku again. Naruto was still next to the boy, trying to coax some sort of response from him, but Haku barely seemed to care, gazing off towards the area where Zabuza had died. Even Kimamaro's death didn't seem to bring any sort of satisfaction to him, he was simply sitting still with a look of desolation on his face. So, Kakashi said, gaining Sora's attention once again, do you agree with him? About us being the same. Sora shook his head as he stood up, smiling slightly. I've lost many things, Kakashi, more than you might guess, and I do understand his feelings, but no, he was wrong. I haven't lost everything I care about. And while I do feel I have a purpose, I don't fear losing it like he did. I chose my path because I believe in it, not because I fear having no path at all. A slight grin appeared under Kakashi's mask. However, before he could speak further, a loud clapping sounded in the distance. Sora squinted in the direction of the sound, laying eyes on a large group of men as the last of the mist cleared. Well done. The pudgy little man that was the source of the clapping said loudly. Now if you don't mind, I'm going to have all of my friends kill all of you now. I can't believe you're making me travel all the way to your village with you, Leah complained a few hours into their journey back to the village. My brother already allowed you to form a summoning contract with my pride, so you could just call me from anywhere. That makes this a waste of my time. Walking all the way back by myself would be too lonely, Naomi answered teasingly, not bothering to look back at the form following close behind her. It was a lie, of course, but she saw no reason to tell Leah the truth anytime soon. So, I don't care. I'm not here to entertain you, and I don't even like you. Naomi shrugged. She's just as blunt as I remember. She knew that most of the hostility was because the lioness didn't fully trust her yet, but she also knew Leah would warm up to her eventually. That was, after all, what had happened the first time. I guess that's too bad since you're stuck with me anyway, Naomi teased, chuckling to herself. You smile and laugh more than I'd expect from someone who claims to come from such a terrible future. Naomi slowed to a stop and looked up, staring at the darkening sky. She hadn't even noticed that night had begun to fall. And what did you expect? A woman who could barely hold herself together. Well, Leah trailed off, not expecting the question. I have been that way at times, Naomi admitted, remembering when she'd seen her father and sister a few weeks before. You see, the old me, she couldn't handle the things that happened. The things I went through. I was forced to change because of the war. Even so, that scared, timid, little girl will always be a part of me, and sometimes she affects what I feel. Still, she turned to meet Leah's eyes. I won't let that girl's fears control everything I do. Even after I'd lost most of my friends and my entire family, I didn't allow myself to fall into depression. I couldn't let myself just spend the rest of my life wasting away. I guess I'm this way because I want to prove that I can still be happy, you know. I have to remind myself that I haven't lost everyone, that I still have something more to live for than old memories. She smiled sadly at her companion. It may just be a naive delusion, but forcing myself to not dwell on the past, to smile and laugh even when times are sad, it helps keep me going, it gives me hope. Leah shook her head and shouldered her way past Naomi. I didn't really ask for a monologue, but I guess if you need to talk to someone, it may as well be me, besides it did explain some things. Anyway, enough of this nonsense, you're starting to depress me. Naomi chuckled, sorry, I didn't mean to ramble like that. It's fine. At least now I know you aren't some crazy woman. She paused, well, not as much of a crazy woman as I thought a few minutes ago at any rate. Naomi smiled to herself and began to follow after the lioness. Naomi, Leah asked suddenly. There was a hint of compassion in her eyes as she turned to look back at the woman. She hesitated. Never mind. Let's go. Naomi's smile deepened. She cares, but she's too stubborn to admit it. Yes, just like I remember. A companionable silence fell over the two as they continued walking into the night. That's it for part 4 of Naruto and Hinata Sent Back in Time. If you're enjoying this timeline-changing story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Naruto What If fanfics. Comment below, should they change the future even more, or try to preserve what's left? See you in part 5.